Hey guys, it's Kevin again, my review for Kung Fu Panda 4. In this film, Po is in a very different phase in his life. He is told by Master Shifu that he has pretty much exhausted all of his time as the Dragon Warrior, so now he is going to become the spiritual leader of the Valley of Peace, and in doing so, he now has to recruit the next Dragon Warrior, and while trying to prepare for that journey and who's going to end up making that choice, he is also made aware that some of the previous villains that he has defeated are now somehow back, specifically Tai Lun. He is unsure what is really going on, but eventually finds out this is connected to this entity known as the Chameleon, who is trying to steal all of these powers, trying to steal everyone's kung fu abilities, and the only other person who might be able to help him is this fox bandit named Zhen. So the two of them need to team up and try to defeat the Chameleon once and for all. And to be honest, I was excited for this film just because I've enjoyed the Kung Fu Panda films up to this point. I think it's one of the more consistent franchises within DreamWorks. I think all of them have found a way to be very fun, but also have, and creative, but also have this genuine sense of heart, really fun performances, and generally, really good stories, and especially rewatching them. I mean, I was honestly amazed by how well all three of them really did hold up. I think the first film tells this great story about courage and about and about challenging yourself in a way that you wouldn't expect yourself to, and pushing yourself to your limits. I think the second film is this great story about legacy, but also about, conquering your inner demons. And the third film is a really good film about, family and reconnecting with, loved ones and kind of finding your inner place. And so I think all three of them have done a really good job of, like I said, appealing to both kids, but also having these really great universal messages for adults. But the thing is, the third film wrapped up the series in such a way that I felt like it was the end. The way it concluded, I thought this is a fine way to wrap up what I thought was going to be a trilogy of films. So when they announced the fourth one, I was like, cool, but I just didn't really know what else they could do with it. Apparently, they also announced this was going to be like a 6-film series. That's not something I was aware of, but one of my friends told me that that has actually been the plan from the get-go. So I was like, okay, let's see how this turns out. The marketing really didn't do it for me. It just felt kind of tiring, and I wasn't really sure how this was going to be, but I was trying to stay optimistic that this would still be something, that this still would be a worthwhile entry. And while I'm not entirely sure if that is the case, I still had a good time with Kung Fu Panda 4 overall. This is still a very fun sequel that finds a way to inject some new elements in the franchise that weren't there before, but we are just getting into right now, starting off with the voice cast here. I mean, what is there to say about the voice cast in these movies that hasn't been said before? Everyone, as usual, is just at the top of their game, specifically Jack Black, who at this point could very easily play this role in his sleep. He's very much at a point in his career where he doesn't really need to be putting the effort into this character. He could easily just be going through the motions at this point. Hell, most franchises at this point, when you're this far into a role, you would expect him to not put as much energy in, but yet it is still very much there. He is putting 110% into Po, and that is what makes this film so much fun to watch. So much of the reason the movie works as well as it does is because Black is still very much into it, and he just kills it in this movie. He oozes with the charisma and the energy that he's had in the other films, but you also feel, Po aging a bit. You feel the fact that he has gone through a lot, and he's, like I said, he's in a very different phase in his life at this point, and I thought that actually worked really well. You feel the journey that Po is going on, but you also feel like he is still trying to, continue doing what he has, maintained and things like that. And I think overall he's just continues to be so much fun in this role, and so much of the reason, like I said, the film works as well as it does is because of his performance here. But I gotta say, the other big standout in this movie, who I don't think is getting enough credit, is Awkwafina, who does play the new character of Zhen, and I think does do a really good job. I know she gets a lot of flack because she's in a lot of animated movies, and a lot of the time she's playing not the most likable of characters. A lot of the time they're kind of annoying and feel like they are just kind of the same, but I felt like here she did did do a really good job at playing this character that has, gone through this backstory of her own. She herself has a reasoning why she's accompanying Poe on this journey, and you really do buy into the bond that these two end up forming. I think they work really well together. She can be very dry and sarcastic, but she also has this can-do attitude that mixes well with Poe, and you really do feel, like I said, that duo between them, and I think that she serves her role very well in this movie. She has pretty big shoes to fill, because if you've noticed, there's a lot of characters that aren't here in this movie, but I think that she does do the job, fit the job well, and I think she did what she needed to. So overall, I enjoyed her performance in this film. Everyone else, I think, does the best job that they possibly can. Viola Davis is very good in this movie. I mean, oh my god, Viola Davis is good in a film. I can't believe it. But no, she does do a really good job as the chameleon. We'll get to the character in a little bit, but I think that she did a really good job of bringing the necessary amount of just menace and sort of this unstoppable nature to this villain. I thought she did a really good job with that. You understand the chameleon and what she's really all about, and I think Davis does a good job in really elevating this character. Like I said, we'll get to the character a little bit later, but I think Davis elevates the menace, elevates the intrigue, and I think that's just what she does. Like, that's she literally did that in Hunger Games last year. I think the character she could have played in that movie could have easily been a throwaway villain, but because she, again, put so much effort into it, you really just bought into it that much more, and I think that's the same with the chameleon. Now, I think the character she played in Hunger Games was much more memorable than the chameleon, but I still really enjoyed Davis in this film. And then the rest of the cast, like I said, I really did enjoy everyone here. Bryan Cranston and James Hahn work really well together. They have a very unexpected sort of partnership in this movie, and I think that they work really well as Poe's fathers. I really enjoy the both of them here. I thought that they did a good job in reprising both of their roles. Dustin Hoffman is in this movie, not admittedly in it all that much, but for what he has, he does do a good job. And Quan, always love getting to see him and stuff. It's really cool to see him have this resurgence of sorts since Everything Everywhere, and he once again gives another really fun performance. I think everyone does do a really good job here. This is another really colorful cast of characters as usual, and that's one of the best, that's definitely one of the best elements of this film for sure. All right, so now we get to the directing and the writing, which these are the things that I think definitely are some more interesting things to talk about when it comes to this movie, because Mike Mitchell as a director, I do think does a good job with this film. He clearly is trying to tell a different kind of story this time around. I think the fun and the humor is still very much there. I was laughing more than I expected to in this movie, and I think for the most part, the jokes very much do land, and I thought he did do a good job. He's no stranger to the franchise, but this is the first time he is directing one of the entries, and you definitely can feel it. It feels like he hasn't, fully understood what works in this series. Jennifer Yu Nelson not being there and not directing this one, or any of the previous directors. You definitely can feel that, but I think Mitchell did what he needed to do to still inject that sense of fun into this, and I think he does a good job. The one thing I will say about the directing that is definitely lacking in this one is the heart in this movie. It's just not really there as much. There are some tender moments for sure. There are some moments that definitely, do get you, but the level of just emotion, and I think the level of, sentiment that you felt, it's just not really here in this one. Instead, it feels a little bit more it just feels a little bit more fun, and because that the film can kind of feel a bit throwaway at points, and we'll get more into that a little bit later, but I think overall, for what he did do a pretty good job when it came to the directing here. When it comes to the writing in this movie, this film, has a very interesting screenplay. All of the writers here, Jonathan Aibel, Glenn Berger, you have those two writers coming back, but you also have Darren Lemkl this time around, who hasn't written a Kung Fu Panda film yet. And I will say, I think the screenplay is easily the weakest element of this entire film. This is really the one thing that I do think does bring this film down if you had to ask me, like, what is the one element here. But there are things that do work really well. Like I said, I think Poe's arc in this movie, I definitely really did enjoy. He really is kind of focusing on what is the next step in his career? Is he able to, should he just continue doing what he's doing, or should he welcome this new phase of his life? Is that something he's prepared to do? Is that something that he is ready to do? Is there someone who can do it better than him? And I think that arc actually does work really well. You do see him take on this more sort of mentor type role and kind of contemplate his future, and I thought that actually did work quite well in this movie, but also have to confront his past like he has in the other films. I think they did do a good job with that. But it has to be said, the plot is way more simplistic this time around. A lot of the more mature themes in the first 3 films, they're here, but they feel a bit more simplified. This really is much more of this buddy comedy between Poe and Jen and them trying to take down the chameleon, and it works because you enjoy both of these characters. We already enjoy Poe, but I think Jen is actually a really well-written character. I enjoyed her quite a bit. She is someone who, she comes from this town where she is very much this wanted fugitive, and she's just trying to get by in that way, but she also has this traumatic past of sorts, and I thought they actually did dive into that very well. You understand a lot of the reasoning as to why she is the way she is. She very much is in this, fighter mentality, and I thought that that character I did really enjoy in this movie. I thought that she did do a really good job here, and I enjoyed the journey that she ended up going on. I think it's hard to bring a character into a franchise, a new character into a franchise like this late, but I think that she honestly fit right in. I thought that they did a good job when it came to Jen, and I really did enjoy her incorporation in the story, though it has to be said that the reason that she has such a huge role in this film is likely to make up for the fact that, if you haven't noticed, the Furious 5 is not in this movie, and you definitely do feel the gap, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But I think that, Jen does fill those shoes as well as she can. Yes, it is hard, obviously, because the Furious 5 have been such prominent characters, and we do kind of feel that void. But I think that Jen does overall make up for that. I think the fact that she is as well written as a character as she is, I still found myself pretty attached to what was going on. Like I said, the story, though, for the most part, though, it is pretty simple with what's happening here with this whole journey that they go on, but I still found myself overall attached to it. I still did enjoy what was going on, but actually, what I enjoyed even more so, I think, was the subplot we have going on here between Lai Shan and Mr. Ping, who have this very unexpected bond in this movie. The third film, they were kind of at odds with each other. They're both Poe's fathers, don't really know where they fit into things, but here, they've kind of come to this understanding, and you really do feel this friendship between the two that has grown, and I really enjoyed watching it throughout the movie. They complement each other very nicely. Lai Shan, in particular, is a very fun character in this movie. There's this recurring gag with him that I thought was really fun to watch, and I really enjoyed their back and forth in this film, and anytime they cut to them, I think that honestly is what produced the most laughs. Anytime I laughed in the movie, it was usually at them. I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff they did with those two characters here. I thought that they found a way to incorporate them, and it never felt like it's forced. It never felt like these two characters have to be here and we don't know what to do with them. It actually felt like they fit pretty organically into this story, and I thought they did a pretty good job with that. There's some other new characters we encounter throughout this film, but like I said, for the most part, it really is just Poe and Jen and them trying to, go on this quest and obtain this scepter of sorts and, stop the chameleon, and that is overall a compelling journey. I did still find myself pretty attached to what was going on, and like I said, the movie is still very funny. There's a lot of fun moments here that I definitely did find myself laughing at. There's this really fun new town we explore where Jen is from, and the characters that populate that are so insane to watch. They're so hungry for violence, and there's this really funny recurring gag they do with them involving them misinterpreting something, and every time they did it, I found myself laughing. I thought it was a really funny idea, and while these characters I didn't necessarily feel that connected to, I thought the fact that they at least did something with them, I thought overall did work. There's a moment where we think we know, Zhen's past, and then we actually go to her location and we find out some things about her, and that made her an even more compelling character. So I thought overall they did, the screenplay here I still definitely did enjoy. It is definitely the weakest of the ones that we've had, but I still did enjoy the screenplay overall. The animation also, I mean, that is definitely something that is in no way a downgrade. In fact, this might just be the best animation out of any film within this franchise. I thought that it was not just, so colorful and vibrant like the other films have been, but they also incorporated this new style to it, especially when it came to the action. I mean, they really just go all out in conveying it. The film has this energy to it that is just kind of infectious, and I thought they did such a great job when it came to the animation in this film. There was one sequence in particular that I thought was just so thrilling to watch, and I really enjoyed the animation here. These films have always done a great job when it comes to the action, and this really is no different. I really enjoyed the animation throughout this. And the score by Hans Zimmer. I mean, as usual, Hans Zimmer delivers, as you expect him to. He does a really good job in conveying the score here. It's crazy that it went from Dune Part 2 to this, but I mean, he did a really good job when it came to the score, and I really enjoyed what he ended up doing here, so really no complaints there whatsoever. Speaking of the score though, I do want to mention this. It's not necessarily part of the score, it's literally towards the end of the movie, but Jack Black did do a cover of a very famous song that you wouldn't expect him to cover at the end of this movie, and by Jack Black I do mean Tenacious D, and it's probably one of the best parts of this film. The movie is worth staying towards the credits just to see what song he does at the end of this movie, and it works really well. I thought it was a really fun moment, and it's definitely one of the most memorable moments of the film. It's crazy to say that the end credits is one of the most memorable moments, but it generally is worth sticking around for sure. And the editing by Christopher Knight, I thought overall was also pretty good here. The movie, I think, for the most part, is very well paced. I do think the first act was kind of rushed, if I'm being honest. I think that the movie just kind of plunges you right into this plot line with the chameleon, and I would have liked for them to take their time a bit more, and that's really where we get to my biggest issue with this movie, in that while I did enjoy the screenplay overall, it is very underwritten in quite a few areas, particularly, like I said, for Poe. He has this arc about facing his past and kind of like figuring out what his future is going to be, but it feels very simplified. It doesn't feel like it feels very one note. It doesn't feel quite as, it's given the depth that it really does need, and I think we just need a bit more time to fully dive into that. Poe has always kind of assumed this role, and now he has to take on a completely different one, and I wish we would have spent a bit more time with him really contemplating that. What does it mean for him to not be the Dragon Warrior anymore? What does it mean for him to take on this new role? Is he well equipped for that? Is he, prepared for it? Does he want to assume this role? Are there other possibilities for him? I wish the movie would have dived a bit deeper into that question. The thing I've always appreciated about these movies is that I think that the characters are super well written. You really do get a chance to dive into, their inner psyche and what they're really dealing with. But this film just doesn't quite go as deep as I really wanted to, and I think that's something that does hurt the movie for sure. Like I said, Zhen I do think is a pretty solid character, but the Furious Five definitely needed to be in this film. There is a role in particular that I really do feel like the Furious Five should have had. I understand, I think you still could have had Zhen there, but it felt like because they had Zhen, they didn't feel the Furious Five fit into here, when I feel like you honestly could have found a way to inject them into the film, especially Tigress, who had such a prominent relationship with Poe. I really do feel like they could have done some stuff with them, and it would have made this that much more impactful. It would have given this film that heart and soul that I think it was kind of missing, and I would have liked to see more with that. I talked about Lai Shan and how I enjoyed the arc that he had, but I wish that it was more of an arc. There's a running gag they do with him throughout this movie that I really liked, but I was like, okay, I feel like I know what they're gonna do with this, and then they just kind of didn't. They just kind of settled for it being this fun gag, and I was fine with that, but I would have liked if they dived a bit deeper into what that really means. He's trying to be the best possible father to Poe that he is, and, he's kind of trying to challenge himself, and I wish they would have dived deeper into that and taken a little bit more seriously than they did, because they mostly do play it for laughs here, and while it does work, again, I just wish they dived deeper into that overall. Now, if you've noticed, the one thing I haven't talked about yet is the Chameleon as a character, and like I said, I enjoyed Viola Davis in this role. As a villain, though, Chameleon really does kind of disappoint. There really isn't that much to latch onto here. She really is just this very powerful, shape-shifting sorceress that wants to be the most that wants to be the most powerful, leader of them all, just has this, very generic sort of plan, and that wouldn't really be a problem if you weren't following someone like a Tai Lun or to Lord Shen. I mean, those two characters were so well written, and I don't think Kai was like the greatest villain, but I still felt like Kai had more of a backstory. There was more going on there. The Chameleon just feels kind of throwaway. I didn't really feel like they explored the full parameters of this character, specifically the fact that she can mimic previous characters from the series. They don't really take full advantage of that. They kind of hint at it in the trailer, but they don't really take full advantage of that, and I just felt like as a character, there was just a lot that was lacking with her. Like I said, I think Davis was good in the role, but I think if we're talking just the Chameleon on her own, I just didn't find her to be all that compelling. I feel like she's just here because they need a villain, and she doesn't have the depth, she doesn't have the, memorable moments that other villains have had. There's some okay moments with her in the beginning where you can see how powerful she is, but overall, I really just found myself underwhelmed by what they end up doing with a Chameleon overall. I think there was so much more potential with this character. The same goes for Tai Lun, who, they hinted at in this film is going to have a pretty big role, really doesn't end up doing that. I mean, for what we have with him, he's good, but I just felt like, again, they really just don't understand the potential of this. I mean, you have a villain that can get you to kind of cap off all the other villains in the franchise, and they don't really do that here. Master Shifu is also a character who I always do enjoy, but he's really put on the back burner in this movie. There's you think he's gonna have a bigger role, and then something happens, and he's just kind of out of commission for the majority of the film. And again, you feel that, similar to the Furious 5, there's a void that is missing. The fact that he doesn't have as big as a role, it definitely does feel like something is missing here. He could have easily been along for the ride, and it just doesn't feel like they gave much for him to do in this movie. So that really is my biggest issue with this, is that while again I enjoy the screenplay, I enjoy the story that we had, I think there was potential for them to dive a lot deeper into certain elements, and in doing so, it would have made the film that much more effective overall. But for the most part, it really doesn't take away from how much I did enjoy Kung Fu Panda 4. You have a really good performances from Jack Black and Awkwafina. Viola Davis is good too, but like I said, the character just didn't really do it for me. But the characters of Poe and Jen, you do find yourself liking their bond throughout the movie, and how that really does evolve throughout the film, I think does work really well. There's some really fun action sequences, some very funny moments. It does go in a simplistic and pretty predictable direction. The way it ends especially, I really found myself just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's kind of how I expected to end. The movie went in this very predictable place, but I think for what this is, it still does end up working. It is admittedly the weakest of the franchise for sure, but I think for a film that is this far into its franchise, the fact that this is still somewhat decent, I think is still very much an accomplishment. The characters are still well written, action scenes still end up working. It still does feel like there is still life in this franchise. There are still new elements that they can incorporate, and this film does end in such a way to where I am interested in seeing, do they have more ideas for a Kung Fu Panda 5? Is there still stuff they can do? I'm interested in seeing what else they have in store, because I think that they are opening up some new possibilities to this franchise, and I would definitely be down to see what they end up doing. A part of me does still think they could have ended at 3, but I think that this film does more than enough to justify its existence. It might not be the most incredible sequel that we've had, but for the most part, I still did really end up enjoying it. So I'm going to give Kung Fu Panda 4 overall a B-. But over, guys, in my review of Kung Fu Panda 4, let me know what you guys saw of this movie. All left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Hollywood infected, you're bringing